Welcome to Sky Factory 4, the mod pack where we gain resources from growing trees, commit heinous animal rights violations, place water in the Nether, then file away my hopes and dreams, all in order to expand our factory to its limits and create the ultimate singularity. So sit back and watch as I start to lose all my sanity, as well as all my FPS. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more content in the future. Now let's get right into it. What is up, guys? We're back here with another modded Minecraft speedrun, and today we're going to be speedrunning Sky Factory 4. I've got a bunch of stuff to yap about, so here you go. Anyways, this is a mod pack that was released all the way back in 2019, and if you're as unk as I am, you may remember some of the OG Minecraft YouTubers that played this. Although I should point out before there's any confusion, Sundy, one of the most popular Minecraft YouTubers at that time, played through a different Sky Factory mod pack, but titled his first video Sky Factory 4 for that one, which is not the same Sky Factory 4 that I'm playing here. I think he just did that because that was like his 4th season of Sky Factory mod packs. And just for reference, that's Feed the Beast Sky Factory 2.5. He did later play the Sky Factory 4 mod pack, so don't get confused on that one either. Anyways, tangent aside, what actually is the goal for Sky Factory 4? Other mod packs like All the Mods 9 and 10 have the All the Mods Star, or others like Compact Claustrophobia have you escaping that bedrock cage, but this mod pack doesn't really have that definitive end goal. There's tons of like challenges that you can do for the mod pack, but some of them are just so absurd that it's not even speedrunnable. I'm looking at you, Sugar High. No, I will not be getting 43 million sugarcane. So the most reasonable end goal for this mod pack is going to actually be the ultimate singularity. The main premise of this mod pack is basically tree growing simulator, so having the end goal being a ton of all the different kind of resources actually works out pretty well. Alright, now one last thing. Before everyone points out that a certain frog individual did this exact speedrun on his stream, or posted a video about it, I don't know if his is going to be out before mine. Yes, I am very well aware of this. So what happened was my YouTube actually recommended his stream, and then I asked my Discord if I should just speedrun it real quick, since, you know, I'm that modded Minecraft speedrunner guy. So yes, I did stream this whole thing, and I'll link that down below, along with Martin's channel and stream, of course. I've actually been planning to speedrun this pack for a little while, and the idea of a little competition definitely nudged me to get it going. So anyways, that's my yap fest over. Let's actually get into the game now. Like most skyblocks, we're going to go ahead and mine our starting tree. Then we'll use those logs to make a crafting table, along with a couple sticks. Let's also make sure to turn the crafting table into a crafting station, that way we can connect it up to some chests later down the line. Then we're going to want to make a wooden crook, that way we can mine all the leaves and get additional drops. Then we'll plant another sapling, and use the rest of the wood to make a couple planks to expand our platform. And I'll be placing these slabs on the top half of the block, since we shouldn't actually need to worry about mob spawns for the most part. And now it's back to growing our dirt trees, which we can twerk at in order to make it grow faster. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a handheld crafting table, which we'll only be needing to use for the early game here. Using the drops from the dirt trees, we can start making some more dirt, which we'll use to expand our little tree farm. I like to place the dirt 2 blocks away from each other, and then we'll just keep expanding this area until we get a 3x3 of saplings. Also note that you can repair your tools inside the crafting table, just make sure you have the right material for it. Now back to expanding our little platform. Now that we have a decent foundation set up, let's go ahead and get into the next step. We'll need to use some slabs to craft up 8 drying racks, and then we'll need to make a little extension to place those drying racks on. Then we'll use these drying racks to turn some dirt acorns into petrified acorns, and we're going to need a total of 8, so let's make sure they're all filled up. And it's not going to take too long for those acorns to start drying out. We need to grab all 8 of those petrified acorns, and then we'll toss them in the crafting table to make a petrified sapling. And now we've officially unlocked the ability to start growing some cobblestone. Now we just need to grow the saplings so that way we can start planting a ton more of them. And for those wondering, the builder's one is just a normal stick and does nothing. But that's why I tossed it out. We're not really going to need any more dirt saplings, so we can replace most of those with some petrified saplings. This also means we now have everything to make a clay sapling, so let's go ahead and craft up one of those and add it to our bunch. Our goal right now is to make a slab furnace, which means we're going to need to grow enough trees to make at least 4 cobblestone. So in the meantime, let's also go ahead and craft up a cauldron, along with 2 crushing tubs. We'll place those crushing tubs next to each other, as well as a couple slabs on top of them, that way we can crush items even faster. Then we're going to go ahead and crush up 8 petrified acorns, turning them all into gravel acorns, which we can then use to make a gravel sapling, which we'll just plop down into our little farm. And now at this point, we're going to want a little bit of storage, And remember that this version of Minecraft, you can't actually place chests next to each other. Now we'll just pop down a crafting station. That way we can use the items in our chests for crafting. Then we'll use our other crushing tub to BKFL 20 saplings into water. If you know, you know. This will result in 2 buckets of water inside the crushing tub. But in order to get those out, we're going to need a couple buckets. So let's craft up all the cobblestone we can, and go ahead and make that slab furnace. Just remember that you can use extra slabs to turn back into cobblestone. This furnace is exactly like a normal furnace. It can just only hold half a stack of items. Then we'll use our clay to make 3 clay buckets, which we'll have to cook inside the furnace. Once cooked, we can grab our water and make an infinite water source. Now let's move that cauldron over here, and for now I'm just going to place it on top of a torch. Then we'll toss some water inside of it and clean out some dirt saplings into an oak sapling. We'll be needing that for an apple later, but for now we can continue on with some other stuff. We can crush down some gravel acorns into sand acorns, and then use those to make a sand sapling. Then we're going to go ahead and wash some gravel inside our cauldron, which will give us some bone meal. And then, you guessed it, we're going to use that bone meal to make a bone sapling. This is actually one of the more important saplings, since we can just grow tons of these and use the bone meal to grow the rest of the saplings. Now we'll toss 4 cobblestone inside the cauldron to make a bucket of lava. Just make sure to do this very quick in the oak cauldron, otherwise your base might burn down. Then we'll need at least 1 piece of sand to turn into glass, and then we'll have everything we need to make a cobblestone generator. This thing will automatically push out cobblestone to any chest above it. It also means that we won't need to grow any more petrified saplings. Now we can go ahead and start upgrading our tools. That way we won't have to repair them nearly as often. Now at this point in the run, we're basically just going to be making a ton of different saplings, so let's get started. We can wash some clay saplings inside some mud, which will make us some jungle saplings. We can also do the same thing with leaves to start making some grass, and you can easily get some leaves with just some wooden shears. Then we'll make a little area with the grass blocks, as we'll be using these for bone mealing for seeds. We'll dry one of the jungle saplings to make some vines, and then use those vines to make a cottonwood sapling. Now at this point, my oak sapling just refused to grow, so I'm just going to speed that up with some bone meal, that way we can get an apple, which we're going to crush inside the tub to get some apple seeds, and place on some dirt so that way we can start making an apple sapling. And I'm going to make sure to grow this one real quick, that way we have some extra apple saplings to work with. I'll end up growing these as my main food source, but before we can do that, we're going to need to cook up a ton of clay into a ton of bricks. Washing out some sand saplings and some water will give us some birch saplings, and these are going to go straight into the furnace to start making some coal saplings. And then we'll just add one of those into our little farm. And now that we finally have some bricks cooked up, we can use those to start making some bonsai pots. These will automatically grow some mini versions of the trees for us, and we'll put some fertile soil into them so that way they grow a little faster. We'll have one growing an apple sapling for some food, and another growing some jungle saplings for some cocoa beans. These pots are unupgraded, which just means we'll have to harvest them manually, which is fine for now as we won't need too many of these. Right now it's just mainly solving the issue of food, since we're using a ton of hunger on all the vein mining. So while those grow for a bit, let's make some porcelain with some clay and bone meal, which we'll have to toss into our furnaces. Then using those porcelain bricks, we're going to start making all the pieces for a porcelain smelter. Let's also craft up a couple wooden hoppers. That way we can give the smelter just a little bit of automation. Just make sure that you're using a porcelain tank under the melter. That way we can use it to melt down some metals. Then we'll have to give it a little bit of fuel, which will consume one of our clay buckets. But not to worry, as we're going to get iron here pretty quickly. All we need to do at this point is to craft up some iron amber, using some resin from all the other trees. Then we'll just toss into our melter and wait for it to liquefy. Now we're going to need an acacia sapling, which we can easily get from washing some apple saplings. Then once our iron is melted, we can pour that onto the acacia sapling, and once that cools down, we'll turn into an iron sapling. We'll be needing tons of iron for the early game of this mod pack, so let's go ahead and craft up a ton of bone meal so that way we can get a bunch of trees going. Hey, you there! Yeah, you, I'm talking to you. While I'm planting these saplings, you should subscribe. YouTube is snitching on you. So go on, go subscribe. Please, I'm so desperate. Anyways, now that we have some iron growing, we can just make the amber out of those, and add it to our melter. Let's also craft up a casting basin, that way we can start pouring some iron without needing a mold. We'll just have to make sure that we have a full block worth. We're also going to want to set up a second melter, that way we can use one just for crafting saplings, and the other for melting down iron at double rates. And luckily this mod pack has the carry-on mod, so we can just move stuff around as we need. And now we're starting to get some blocks of iron, so let's use some of those to make a bucket real quick, that way we can actually start moving around lava without our bucket getting destroyed. Luckily the melters don't use too much lava, so we'll only need to fill them up about once or twice throughout the run. And now that we have some iron going, we can start making some hoppers for some automatic bonsai pots. For now, I'll just automate our current pots, which we can just reuse later whenever we want to grow different saplings. We're also going to need to grow some sugarcane in a little bit, which we can grow super fast using some snad. This will grow sugarcane and cactus whenever you give it a redstone pulse, and for now I'm just going to set it up with a lever, since we don't have any redstone currently. Then in order to get sugarcane, we'll just have to crush some leaves. Now we're coming up pretty soon to wanting to automate all our trees, so right now I'm just going to set up a couple more automatic bonsai pots, which I'm going to give a sand and a bone sapling, as those are the ones I've decided that I just don't want to grow myself. Then it's off to create new sapling types, so we can get some dark oak by washing some coal saplings, and then we can use that to craft up a lapis sapling. Then we'll just have to grow a couple of those until we have enough to make some lapis, which we'll be using in our next sapling. Then over at our little grass patch, we'll have to use some bone meal until we can get some dandelions and poppies. Now we can go ahead and use those to craft up a redstone sapling and add it to our little farm. Let's also go ahead and craft up some tin amber and add that into our secondary smelter. Then we'll have to wash out some sand saplings for some birch. That way we can pour some tin onto it to make a tin sapling. And then of course we'll add that one to the farm. Now we can use that lapis from earlier to make some lead amber and plop that into our meltery. We just want to first replace that melter so that way we can get rid of the leftover tin inside. Then we can add our lead amber to it. This one's also going to take a dark oak sapling, and after not too long, we've got our lead sapling. We'll want to grow this one real quick with some bone meal, since we'll need some lead for another sapling. Speaking of which, we can now go ahead and make some gold amber, and toss that one into the melter after replacing it. Then we'll just have to toss in an oak sapling in order for us to make the gold sapling. Just like with all the saplings, we want to make sure to grow them first. That way we can get extra saplings just in case we accidentally lose one. For our next sapling, we're going to need some black dye, and the easiest way to do that is to pulverize some coal on a grindstone. Now we can use that pulverized coal to make some light gray dye, which we'll then use to make some silver amber. And just like everything else, we'll add it to our melter. This one's going to need some mineral saplings, which we can easily get by washing some lapis saplings. I'm also making sure that I'm growing as many iron trees in the meantime, as we'll be needing tons of iron for automating all our saplings. And as soon as our silver sapling's done, we'll make sure to grow it real quick. Now at this point, we have everything we need to make a diamond sapling. So let's add that to our farm, as we'll need some diamonds pretty soon. Our next sapling is going to require us to craft with a basin, as well as pour a bucket of lava inside of our melter. Now we're going to need some redstone amber, which we'll pour the lava on top of to start making some netherrack, which we're going to need one of to craft up a netherrack sapling. When breaking the leaves of the netherrack tree, we have a chance to get some quartz, so we're just going to keep growing a couple netherrack trees until we can get 16 quartz. And with that 16 quartz, we now have everything we need to start making a simple storage network. So let's go ahead and craft up all the pieces we need for that. And now with the network master and request table, we'll just need to connect up our storage links to get access to all our items. I'm also going to make sure that all the storage links connected to our chests have a low priority, meaning a higher number so it goes last. That way whenever I put items in the network, it will only put them into these chests if there's no other space anywhere else, since the bulk of our items are actually going to be stored in filing cabinets. But just like that, we now have really convenient storage, making crafting stuff hundreds of times easier. Now let's go back over to the sugarcane and grow it a bit, since we'll be using tons of paper pretty soon here. I probably should have made a redstone clock at this point, but who cares. Now I'm going to use that paper to make some folders, which we'll be using to store items inside filing cabinets. Let's also go ahead and start expanding our platform a bit, and make room for all the automatic trees we're going to start farming. In order to use a filing cabinet, you'll have to tell it which items it wants to store, which you can do by combining that item with a folder, and then adding that folder into the filing cabinet. If you place the bonsai pot directly on top of the filing cabinet, you don't have to worry about making sure you have every type of folder. The bonsai pot will just keep running anyways, and basically just destroys any items that you don't end up storing. Now, once you change the setup at all, this is going to become an issue, which I'm going to later learn down the line. But by connecting up a cable to our filing cabinet, we can access all of its items inside of our storage network. So let's go ahead and craft up as much iron amber as we can. That way we can start making more filing cabinets and automatic botany pots. Now, most of our saplings we're going to end up wanting to grow multiple of, so I'm going to go ahead and make some item extraction cables. That way we can start connecting up multiple bonsai pots into one filing cabinet. Now, if you want to play this mod pack, I do not recommend this strategy. This, of course, is my first playthrough of this mod pack, and I definitely do a bunch of dumb things that kind of make me cringe while editing this. Now, it's not like this doesn't work. This definitely does work. You just need to make sure that you have every single output that the sapling has inside the filing cabinet. Otherwise, these cables end up getting stuck, and you get no more output. Also, the cables are just, like, really dumb, and they piss me off so much throughout this playthrough. But again, this is an old mod pack that hasn't been updated in years, so you can't really blame it too much. Anyways, as I start expanding this farm, I'm going to place a couple botany pots on the side here. That way I can start generating the loot table for all the different trees, since I'm going to need to add every single drop from each sapling into a folder. And the majority of them will all drop similar stuff, those being the acorn and resin, leaves and saplings, and then sticks and logs. With the exception of a few saplings that have a chance to drop an extra item, like the netherrack sapling has a chance to drop quartz. So let's go ahead and keep expanding our farm, as we're going to need to automate basically every single type of sapling. Also, I hope you enjoy the screechy noise of the filing cabinets opening and closing, as you're going to be hearing that a lot throughout this run. So enjoy my suffering as I slowly add each sapling into the new farm. Now it's at this point that I realize that I'm quite a fool, and that every sapling that's using the cable method is going to require every single loot drop into the filing cabinet. Otherwise, it just doesn't generate anything. I also went ahead and connected up a chest to the cable, that way I can quickly grab any item that didn't get filed away. Now that we have a good chunk of trees automatically growing, let's go ahead and make a marketplace, as we're going to need to use this to trade for some items. Just be careful where you place this. The first thing we're going to trade for is some corn, but that's going to require some wheat. So let's go ahead and make a watering can to grow some crops quicker, and then we'll need to bone meal the grass until we get some seeds. Then it's time to start growing some crops, and with this watering can you can just turn it on and leave it in your offhand. Then once we get at least 16 corn, we can go ahead and buy a cow seed. And we're also going to want a chicken seed, so let's go ahead and grab one of those as well. For the cow, we're going to need to trap it in a little box, and I'll be placing it a little bit higher up in the air. This is because we'll later put a machine underneath it, so that little bit of extra wiggle room will definitely be helpful. Now we can just quickly grow the cow with some bone meal, and then we'll feed it tons of wheat so that way it turns into an adult sooner. And as for the chicken, I'm just going to trap that in a little hole. Now, the only reason I was growing chickens was for eggs, which you can just buy from the market anyways, so this is kind of useless. So, have fun living in darkness, little guy. But now that our cow is fully grown, we can go ahead and get some milk, which we're going to use to make some blue slimy dirt. And then we'll also use a second bucket of milk, and dunk a lapis sapling inside that to get a blue slime sapling. The slime saplings can only grow on slimy dirt, so let's go ahead and grow one of those for some slime. Let's also go ahead and craft up some nickel amber, and toss that into the melter for the nickel sapling. And for this one, you'll just need to pour it onto an iron sapling. We're working our way towards an emerald sapling, which means we'll have to craft up some green slimy mud and toss into the furnace. Then once our nickel sapling's finished up, we'll need to grow that for a little bit of amber. Let's also go ahead and add it to a filing cabinet. Now we should have everything we need to make an emerald sapling, so let's grow one of those and add it to our auto farm. Next up, we're going to need some blaze powder, which we can easily get by crushing some netherrack. We're also going to need to grind up some netherrack to make some sulfur, and then we'll combine all those together to make some pyrotheum dust. Now we're going to need to go ahead and melt down the pyrotheum dust, and this can take quite some time in the melter. Not too big of a deal, we got some more stuff to work on. We can go ahead and craft up a book without any leather, and then we'll just need to craft up 2 emeralds to make a tome of knowledge. Using this book, we can store some XP levels, as well as to easily convert them into liquid XP. Then we'll need to pour that essence of knowledge onto some sand, which will start generating us some soul sand. Washing some regular sand in some red dyed water will get us some red sand, which we're going to use to make some copper amber. And of course this is going to go into our melter so that way we can make a copper sapling. We're just going to need a spruce sapling, which we can easily get by washing a petrified sapling. And of course you know the drill at this point. Now at this point, it looks like our pyrotheum is finally melted up, so let's grab a bucket of that and toss it into our cauldron. Then we use a blue slime sapling on that to get a magma slime sapling. Growing these will give us a different type of slime ball, which we're going to need to craft up our next sapling. We can use these slime balls to make some slimy magma mud, and that one's going to get tossed into the furnace as well. Then we can use that slime crystal to make a quartz sapling. We'll add that one to our farm, and then we can use that quartz resin to make some osmium amber. And for this one, we're going to need a mineral sapling. Now we should have everything we need to start getting into some Mekanism, and I'm also going to craft up a couple simple generators, that way we can start generating some power. We can just automatically export some logs into this combustion generator, since we basically have an infinite amount of those anyways. Now to get into Mekanism, we're going to need that infuser, and then we can just place that next to our generator. We're also going to want to get into some industrial foregoing soon, so let's craft up a fluid extractor, and I'm just going to place some acacia wood next to it so that way it can start generating some latex. Then we're going to need a latex processing unit to start turning that latex into rubber. We're going to need to give this thing some water, so the easiest way to automate that is going to be getting into some nuclear craft. All we're going to need is a manufactory, and connect it to some power cables. And again, don't use cyclic energy cables, they are not good. And with the manufactory, we just need to crush down some coal. And now that we have some graphite, let's go ahead and make an infinite water source. Plop that next to the latex unit, and it'll slowly keep supplying it with water, giving us some dry rubber that we'll need to cook inside the furnace to make some plastic. Now we can craft up that animal sewer, which we'll place underneath our cow to start making some manure. Exactly the reason that we put the cow so high up. Now at this point, we're just going to need to power it. And for whatever reason, I was very set on getting some flux networks going, which you really don't need to do for this mod pack. So I decided to start growing some pumpkins, as I'll be using these to craft some enderman seeds. We will need ender pearls either way, so it's not the biggest time waste. We are going to need some endstone for these enderman seeds, which means we're going to need to start pouring some lava on some glowstone. It also means we need to make that glowstone sapling, and add it into our farm. Now we can finally go ahead and start crafting up that endstone, and we're going to need quite a bit of this for all the enderman seeds. Although at this point I realize that I can just use a simple generator to power this thing, since the sewer basically takes no power to run. Now back to getting those ender pearls. I'm going to craft up as many enderman seeds as I can, as we're going to need to kill a bunch of these until we get 4 ender pearls. And as for killing these guys, we can just use the simple boat method. That way they don't start teleporting around, and we can easily kill them without getting hurt. And as you'll be able to see pretty quickly, my ender pearl luck is not quite there. Now at this point, it's taking so long to get these ender pearls that my sewer is going to fill up. So let's set up the sewage composter right next to it. That way we can start making some fertilizer. Then back to killing endermen to get our last ender pearl. And now that we finally have 4 ender pearls, let's go ahead and make some ender seeds, which we can plant on some tilled endstone, and start growing pretty quickly with our watering can to start making some more ender pearls. And at this point, I'm still dead set on getting a flux network going, which means we're going to have to start crafting up a ton of obsidian. For the flux network, all we're going to need is a flux plug, as well as a couple flux points for wherever we need to put the power. Also, I have like no power generation right now. I don't know what this guy's doing. Whatever. Let's go ahead and start upgrading our Mekanism machines, which means we'll have to infuse a couple things, such as iron and coal to start making some steel. That way we can make some steel casings, which I'm going to use to make an enrichment chamber. Let's also craft up a building gadget, which we can charge inside an energy cube. Now just use that building gadget to start expanding our base. That way we have tons of room to work with. I also love that this is the version of Minecraft that placing blocks over the void just freezes your game. Definitely don't miss that in newer versions. Let's also go ahead and light up this area. That way we don't have to worry about any pesky mob spawns. Now let's go ahead and upgrade our cobblestone generator, as I'm going to want to set up a lava farm to start generating some power. But in order to continue upgrading this, we're going to need some blaze rods. Let's go ahead and set up an uncrafting grinder. And this thing's kind of stupidly broken, but for now we're just going to use it to turn blaze powder into blaze rods. Now it's time to set up that lava farm. Although there are way better power options in this game, and honestly I just don't recommend setting this up. I have actually gone through and refined the speedrun a ton since this run. And if you want to check out my updated notes, consider becoming a supporter, giving you access to all my speedrunning guides. Check out the description for more information on that. Now back at it, we have our cobblestone generator supplying our dropper with some cobblestone. You can use an automated clicker instead of the dropper. Both work just about the same. The dropper is just a tiny bit cheaper. Then we just pump out that lava into the geothermal generator with a metal drum for some excess storage. But as you can see, this thing is quite slow at generating power. But no worries, we'll be upgrading that in just a moment. Let's just add an energy cube for a little energy buffer as well. The generator can be crafted into an upgradable form, which works exactly the same, other than we are now able to add some speed upgrades to make it run faster. Although these speed upgrades are quite expensive, and we're going to need stacks of them in order for that generator to make anywhere near enough power. But we at least have something at this point, so we can go ahead and set up that flux network, even though it's like 10 feet away and we could have just put a cable there. Definitely a case of always doing things the same way, and being too stubborn to change. Let's also go ahead and add those upgrades to the generator. Each upgrade adds 15 RF a tick, meaning that thing fully upgraded only makes 4,000 RF a tick. So yeah, we're gonna need a few upgrades in order to power our machines. Although, again, the energy cables are literally deleting energy, I think. And if we just replace those with some basic flux ducts, we'll see that our power is no longer getting deleted. So yeah, don't use those energy cables. And let's make sure those flux ducts are connected up to everything. Now checking up on our uncrafting grinder, we now have our 8 blaze rods, meaning we can now go ahead and upgrade our cobblestone generator to the max tier. Then just keep adding speed upgrades into the lava generator to start generating more power. Also, I finally checked the rates on these generators, and the combustion generator makes more power than the thermal generator. So I would have just been better off burning wood this whole time. Anyways, I'm gonna craft up a biogenerator here, since my power generation is clearly god-awful. So yeah, this run is just a total mess. But again, it's just my first playthrough of the pack, so not too big of a deal. Plus, I'll be making even bigger mistakes later down the line. Anyways, at this point, we finally have some basic Mekanism machines going, which means we don't need to use the melter anymore for making our iron. Anyways, it's now time to do one more setup for making mulches, which is going to require some pressurized chambers, as well as a couple other Mekanism machines. Then we'll just put down some cables on the floor for where we want our machines to be powered, and set up our pressurized reaction chambers. We'll have one for creating substrate, and the other for making HDPE sheets. We're also going to need an electrolytic separator in the back to start making some hydrogen and oxygen, and then connect that up to our machines using some pressurized tubes. We'll use an item cable for pulling out the substrate, which half of it is going to be going into our other pressurized reaction chamber. Just make sure that all the machine settings are set correctly. As for the other half of the substrate, we'll store that inside a chest, as we'll be needing to use that for some crafting. Then we'll need to set up a fluid cable, which will push liquid ethylene into our other reaction chamber. This is an older version of Mekanism, otherwise we could have just had the condenserator push it out itself. Then we'll just need to add some water to the electrolytic separator, and start powering everything up. Looks like everything's working now, which means we'll just have to add in some biofuel to start making some substrate, as well as some of those HDPE pellets. We now have everything we need to start making some higher tier mulches, so let's go ahead and start crafting those up. These mulches will increase the speed and drop rate of all the saplings inside their botany pots, so having higher tiers is definitely a necessity if we want to make that Singularity. Each singularity we're going to have to craft up will require 10,000 of an item, with there being a total of 28 unique singularities we're going to have to craft up. Now in this run, I only decided to go for the second highest tier mulch, because at the time I didn't think making the highest tier mulch was going to be worthwhile. We are going to need to enrich some HDP pellets into sheets, which will allow us to start crafting up some black mulch. Again, there is blue mulch, which is one tier higher, but for this run I only go with the black mulch. Now it's time to go ahead and start replacing our bonsai pots with our new mulch. This will increase both the speed and number of drops each tree gives. This tier of mulch gives the max amount of acorns and resins per tree, so upgrading to the blue mulch would just double its speed rather than its drops. So in my mind, instead of making the blue mulch, I'm just going to make twice as much black mulch, which isn't the worst idea. It just means I'm going to need twice as many bonsai pots, so there might be a bit of lag coming up, especially with these stupid pipes that I'm going to set up. So apologies in advance if the video starts looking pretty choppy. Anyways, at this point I'm just going to upgrade as many farms as I can, and upgrade the rest whenever we have more black mulch. Next up, we're going to enrich some diamonds into their compressed form, and toss those into the infusing factory, so that way we can start making some platinum. For now I only need 3 platinum, but later down the line we'll need to make 4 more. So once we smelt up that platinum dust, we can go ahead and use our 3 platinum to make a platinum pickaxe. We need a high tier pickaxe to mine some ores in the nether, and this is basically just the simplest one you can make. Then before heading to the nether, let's go ahead and make some emerald armor, just in case we take a couple hits in the nether, because we definitely don't want to die in there. And I'm also going to go ahead and make an emerald axe, that way we have at least a half decent weapon to kill some stuff. Now to make the cake, we're going to need a couple of buckets of milk, since the nether cake requires a normal cake first. Then all we have to do is surround that cake in some obsidian, and of course we're missing 1, so let's go ahead and make a couple extras, and then we can finally craft up our nether cake. Now we can just place that down anywhere, and before we head in, we can make a little bit more black mulch, so let's go ahead and upgrade a couple more saplings. Now to finally head into the nether, where we're just going to immediately scout out the area a little bit, and then place down some water. When entering the nether for the first time, you get a free overworld cake, meaning we can leave the nether from anywhere, and won't need to worry about getting back to this platform. So let's head on down and make our way towards the fortress. Just be careful, since blazes can spawn basically anywhere, but we also have a water bucket, so we can just put ourselves out. Here in the nether, we're looking for 3 things, some cobalt and ardite ore, as well as hopefully 8 inferium essence from just killing random stuff. I'm also going to go ahead and loot a couple of fortress chests, as there's a couple items that could be pretty helpful. In the fortress, we're also going to grab some netherwort and soul sand, though spoiler warning, this idiot throws out his netherwort in just a little bit. Now we're just going to head up some of these netheric formations, until we can find a little bit of cobalt as well as some ardite. Now, there's vein miner in this mod pack, but as soon as I get to the nether, I just forget that it's a thing. It's not the biggest deal since we only need a couple pieces, but it is quite interesting. Anyways, let's throw out that netherwort that I actually wanted, and then run around a little more until we find some ardite, which you might have guessed, I just refuse to use vein miner on. Like, what is this guy doing? Yeah, at this point in the run, I'm looking for that inferium, which technically says that there's a nether ore for it, but I can basically guarantee you that that does not spawn in the nether, or at least not visibly on the surface. So instead, I'm gonna have to kill some mobs for it, which we only need 8 of, you know, how hard could it be? I'm also gonna head back into the fortress because I really want an air charm, which luckily we find pretty quickly. The air charm gives you semi-flight. It basically turns air blocks into scaffolding, so definitely not the same as creative flight, but still pretty helpful nonetheless. Anyways, the rest of the time in the nether is pretty boring. It's basically just me running around trying to kill stuff for some inferium. I don't know the exact drop rates, or which mobs can drop them in general. I only needed 8, so I didn't think it would be this big of a deal. I found a much easier way to get inferium essence, but you'll know more about that in the next video. So yeah, it's basically just me running around trying to kill stuff for a while. But it ends up taking so long that at some point, I'm just gonna give up, since it's probably just gonna be faster to make an automatic mob farm real quick, and hopefully get the last few essence from that. So let's just place down that overworld cake, and head back home. Now at this point, I want to make that mob farm, although I didn't plan for this at all in my notes, so this is just me totally winging it. I basically just go with like a generic shoot design, and I basically just try and copy the same design that I used when I played this many years ago, which you'll see is not very efficient. But of course it doesn't really need to be efficient, I just need a couple inferium. And then of course I break the one rule of modded skyblock: never vein mine your base. Luckily it's not that big a deal since we have the building gadget. And of course now I magically remember I have vein miner now that I'm out of the nether. Whatever. I'm just gonna make a bit of a box up here, and then inside of the box I'm gonna put some fans. These fans will blow back basically anything in front of them. We'll just need to power them with some redstone. And again, you don't have to use fans, there's an even better, more efficient block you can use. But I'm gonna be super sneaky on that one and not tell you until the next video. So yeah, I basically just need to go power all these fans now, which should hopefully push all the mobs into the corner. Now at the bottom of the chute, I'm just going to place down a bunch of spikes, which is an oddly expensive choice. But again, I'm just using the memory from like years ago when I played this game. Also, there's a good chance that you need to player kill the mobs to get essence. Nonetheless, either way, we're going to have to set up an item collector. Then we can just let this farm run for a little bit while we do some other stuff, and pray that it gives us the last few essence that we need. Let's also go ahead and now prepare those saplings we just got in the nether. First up, we'll dunk a blue sapling inside some destabilized redstone, which will get us a purple slime sapling. So let's grow that for a couple more saplings, which of course I vein mined the leaves with a shovel. So I didn't get any saplings, and we're gonna need to make a second one. This time, let's actually use our crook. And finally get those extra saplings, which we didn't really need because we only need one of these anyways, so, you know. Anyways, after pouring some cobalt on that one, we get the cobalt sapling, which we're gonna go ahead and add to our farm. Then for the ardite sapling, we'll just have to pour the molten ardite onto a magma sapling. And then of course, add that one into our farm as well. Now for the last few resources we need to unlock, we're going to need a couple more flowers, which we'll then use to craft a cake to take us to the Twilight Forest dimension. Once here, you may notice that this is also a custom dimension, which is actually going to make it a lot easier for us. The only thing we need from here right now is some uranium ore, which we can easily spot on the side of this island. And then once again, we're in another dimension, so it's time to forget we have vein miner again. Again, not that big of a time loss, but quite annoying. But that's really all we need from here, so let's head back to the overworld. There's no uranium sapling, unfortunately, which means the only realistic way to farm 10,000 of this is to start getting into some mystical agriculture. Which of course means we need that inferium, so let's check up on that mob farm again. And of course there's nothing in here. So yeah, I'm quite concerned at this point. So assuming that these spikes don't actually drop them when killing mobs, let's just go ahead and replace them and start killing the mobs ourselves. Since at this point I think I'm only like 1 or 2 essence away. Now after killing all these mobs, let's see what we got. And nothing again. This is nice. But after waiting a couple seconds for some more mobs to drop, this happened. Oh, I saw one. I'm out of here. Frick you. So yeah, that was about 20 minutes of my life for something that I thought would take like 2. But now we have everything we need to make some inferium seeds, which means we can finally get into mystical agriculture. First up, we'll need to grow the inferium seeds a couple times, which shouldn't take too long with our watering can. And as soon as we have enough inferium, I'm going to go ahead and start making some fertilizer to instantly grow our crops, so that way we have more chances to get an extra seed. And with that extra seed, we can go ahead and expand our farm, and repeat that process until we get a couple more extra ones. Now that we have quite a few seeds growing, let's go ahead and grab 4 of them, which we're going to use to craft a prosperity sapling, which of course we're going to go ahead and add to our automatic tree farm. Now that we have some prosperity shards going, we can make an infusion crystal, which we'll then use to start upgrading some of our inferium into the next tier. And then once we get 8 prudentium, we're going to go ahead and use those to make some tier 2 seeds. Now let's repeat that same process with the tier 1 seeds, that way we can start getting some extra tier 2 seeds. But instead of planting those extra tier 2 seeds, we're actually going to go ahead and start uncrafting them, since each tier 2 seed is actually worth 8 prudentium. And now we can easily go ahead and craft up the next tier of seeds, which we can then repeat that same exact process with. We're going to keep repeating this until we get some tier 5 seeds, which really doesn't take too long. There's not really any reason to go ahead and make the tier 6 seeds, so we're just going to stick with these tier 5 ones. And now whenever we need essence, all we need to do is get an extra tier 5 seed from growing it, and then we can uncraft that into 8 supremium. Now let's go ahead and craft up a couple pieces for a farm, since of course we need to farm stuff other than inferium. So let's go ahead and craft up a ton of dirt for the area, and then get started on making our farm. Now at this point in the farm, I realize I'm going to need tons of water, and it's probably just going to be faster to remove this dirt and replace it. Now that the water's placed in, let's go ahead and replace our dirt. Now for this run, I decided to go with sprinklers to increase the speed of our crops, which of course is not a good idea. I was under the impression that this was the only way to increase your crop growth speed, and these sprinklers add so much lag to your game. I later end up realizing about the hydrators from Industrial Foregoing, but that ends up being too little too late. And instead I decided to just craft up stacks of sprinklers, which of course do work, it's just, like 10 times the effort for half the reward. So let's go ahead and add these lag machines into my farm. Now for this mod pack, there's at least 6 different kinds of seeds that you're going to want to farm. First up being those uranium seeds, since there's no sapling for this one. So let's plop that into our farm, and then grow it a bunch so that way we can get some extra seeds. The harvester we use to collect our crops will not generate extra seeds, so whenever we need more of any seed type, we're going to have to grow it ourselves. Then let's just set up a little storage system for all our essence, since most of these seeds end up needing 40,000 essence in order to craft the 10,000 ingots for a singularity. Now with those growing, I want to go ahead and get back into Mekanism and upgrade all our machines with the max upgrades. Although at this point, we're running out of energy, which is not surprising since I have the worst setup known to man. So how do I solve this energy crisis? I'll tell you how not to do it. I'd be setting up a ton of simple combustion generators, since each of these only makes 20 RF a tick. It would have been more efficient for me to actually upgrade one of these generators and take out all the speed upgrades from the lava gen and put it into this, since the lava gen only does 15 per tick and these do 20 per tick, which is just hilarious how awful all these generators are. So yeah, I decided to set up a whole smelting factory for smelting logs into charcoal, which I then supplied to all these generators, which isn't even enough power to keep up with the smeltery, unless I decide to take out a ton of the speed upgrades out of it. So yeah, watching back on this, it's sad. And at this point in the run, I finally make a simple storage remote, which I probably could have made as soon as I made my simple storage network. So yeah, all around very efficient work for a speedrun. But getting back to our trees, I'm going to go ahead and start expanding our diamond sapling, since this is one of the most inefficient saplings, and we'll need tons of them in order to get to that 10,000 diamond mark. And now that we added the pipes into the saplings, we're going to have to make sure that we have every single drop inside the filing cabinet. And if you end up noticing, I don't add the sticks into it, so we're going to be getting 0 drops until I fix this later, so you'll love to see that. Next up on the list, I'm going to set up some auto crafting, which we're going to need a crafter for basically every single sapling. We'll set up an exporter to push out what we want to craft, which for now is going to be our diamond acorns to turn into diamonds. So let's set the recipe inside the auto crafter, and then give it some power so that way it can start crafting. This thing can actually craft pretty quick, so let's make sure our exporter is upgraded with a stack upgrade, so that way we can push out tons of diamond acorns all at once. Then let's set up some storage for all our crafts, since we're going to need to set up tons of these crafters. We can use a redstone torch to tell cables where not to connect up to, which we'll need to do for this setup in order to connect more cables. It's at this point that I realize the diamonds are not producing anything, and ends up taking me a whole 3 minutes just to realize I didn't add any sticks into the filing cabinet. But after adding that in, we can see that our saplings are finally starting to work. And now back to blocking off those cables, that way we can start adding in more saplings. You may also notice sometimes in this mod pack some things will stop being visually updated, which can be pretty annoying and requires you to relog to fix it. But now at this point, we're just going to keep adding more crafters, that way we can craft each sapling's drops into its resources. Most of these, like gold, will have to turn into ambers, which requires you to output 2 different resources into the crafter. But more on that later. I'm just going to quickly replace all these crafters real quick, since I didn't leave enough room to add some power cables to them. Now it's at this point in the run that I realized that having 2 different outputs is kind of an issue, since the exporter would just export the first item until it's full, which would result in there not being enough room to craft an item. So I decided to hop over to my other world to try and figure out a solution, and ended up going with a formulaic assembler from Mekanism, since this has a setting that would resolve that issue. Although even at max speed, this thing is much slower than the other crafter. So I go ahead and head back to the other world to start making some formulaic assemblers to replace the setup for any crafters that required 2 or more items. This was obviously not in my initial planning, and these things can be quite expensive and energy consuming. But after setting up the first formulaic assembler, I realized that there's an upgrade in simple storage networks that kind of solves this entire issue. So yeah, I just wasted all that time on that, since all I need to do is actually go ahead and make a stock upgrade. If we add this upgrade to an exporter, it'll only output items into its adjacent inventory if that inventory has less items than we set it to. So basically it'll never get more full than a stack of each item, and we can actually go back to using these better auto-crafters. So yeah, I definitely make a lot of mistakes in this first casual playthrough, but you'll see I can lower this time pretty quickly in the next video. But now that we have this auto-crafter set up properly, we can go ahead and remove the formulaic assembler, since we're not going to be needing that anymore. Now for all the ambers we're going to craft up, we're going to want to automatically process those. So let's go ahead and set up an enrichment factory to double the ores, and then a smelting factory to smelt them down. Then just make sure that the smelting factory is exporting its ingots, which we're going to store inside another filing cabinet. Now any ambers that we want to smelt down, we'll just add into this exporter, and it'll get automatically processed by our machines. And then later down the line, we'll need to add a couple more machines to increase our processing speed. Just make sure you add a folder for every ingot into this filing cabinet, otherwise the machines will start clogging up. Then we just need to connect this up to our network so that way we can access its items. So now let's go ahead and add some more ambers to get processed. Back over at the substrate farm, I'm going to finally add an export cable, and for this one we'll just export any kind of sapling for making more biofuel. This is definitely something I should have done a long time ago, but better late than never, I guess. And back over at the crafters, let's go ahead and make that iron amber. That way our processors can start turning it into ingots. But now that we added more machines, we're going to need some more power gen. So let's add a couple more upgrades to the lava gen. Then we'll have to head back to the melter for some destabilized redstone. That way we can start making some upgraded energy cables. And the crafting recipe for these cables is kind of stupid. It's basically the same as when you go to the store to get some hot dogs, where hot dogs come in packs of 10 and the buns only come in packs of 8, which leaves us with leftover cables that we can't upgrade since we need at least 5 of them. I get that there's the other recipe, but like, why is this a thing? Anyways, I'm going to upgrade my old cables so that way we can finally get some power output going through, since the other ones were getting throttled a bit. Now if we head back to our machines, we can see that our power is finally going through. Back over at the sapling farm, we're going to add a couple more iron saplings, since we'll need about 30,000 iron in total. Then we'll just need to go ahead and upgrade basically every other sapling, that way we can start pushing for the 10,000 of each item that we'll need. Now, I mentioned it earlier in the video, but there's a couple times throughout this mod pack where the visuals just stop updating. But luckily it's just a visual bug, and that you can still interact with everything. There's a chance that reloading your chunks might fix it, but I actually never ended up testing that while I was doing this. So yeah, let's plant some saplings inside these empty pots, which kind of makes me look a little schizo. Although when it's bugged out, I can't tell if the filing cabinets are updating properly, so let's go ahead and relog to fix that one real quick. And with a quick look at the cabinets now, we can see that we finally put the files in properly. Now there's 3 more saplings we're going to need to craft up. First up, we'll have to craft up and then cook some dough, which we would then use to turn into some donuts and make a donut sapling. We shouldn't need too many of these donut saplings, so we'll just set it up on a single filing cabinet for now. Next up, we'll craft up some cookies to make a cookie sapling, and then we'll just toss that next to the donut sapling. And for our final sapling, we'll use some bacon to craft up a bacon sapling. Then just toss that one in with the others, making this the last sapling type that we need. I'm now going to go ahead and craft up an alloy furnace, which I'll be needing to make a couple new alloys. We can toss in a couple of speed upgrades, and then we can go ahead and start making some alloys. First up, we're going to combine some cobalt and ardite in order to craft up some manolin. Once we have 4 manolin, we can make some manolin seeds, which we're going to go ahead and add to our farm. Let's make sure to fertilize it a ton so that way we can get some extra seeds to start growing them faster. For our next seeds, we're going to need to melt down a couple ender pearls, and then grab a bucket of that so that way we can make some Enderium blend. Then we'll just need to smelt those down into ingots so that way we can make some Enderium seeds. And just like with the other ones, let's go ahead and add that to our farm. The rest of the seeds we need are pretty easy. We can use that extra platinum that we had earlier to make some platinum seeds. And then we can easily craft up some lumium and signalium seeds. Now back to the farm to start adding all those seeds in. And as you can see, we're starting to run out of room in this farm, which we'll be expanding in just a little while. Let's also make sure not to forget all the new files that we're going to need for each of our new essences. And of course, we'll need to fill in more sprinklers for all the new crops. And at this point, the game might start looking a little stuttery. So yeah, be careful with the sprinklers. And back over at the crafting setup, we got a ton more ambers that we need to craft up now. So let's go ahead and add all those recipes in. Now back over at the processing plant, we can see that we're running out of power again. Who could have ever seen this possibility coming? Of course, we must check out our ultra-powerful power gen and see if there's some kind of issue going on over here. Well, it seems it's still generating power, so of course the only option is to add more speed upgrades. Now this technically does the trick for a little while, but again, this is not the way to do it. I'm also going to go ahead and plant some beetroots inside the farm, since we'll be needing tons of red dye for this later. And luckily we're finally getting some power inside this harvester. Let's also make sure that we add those beetroots and beetroot seeds into the filing cabinets as well. Now using that red dye, we can make some red fertilizer, which we're going to plant beneath all our crops to increase their growth rate. We'll also need that red dye for making some purple dye, that way we can add more auto crafters into our setup. We still have quite a few recipes to add, so let's go ahead and set up more crafters for all those recipes. And now that we have quite a few recipes crafted up, we're going to start having issues with these cables. It seems the max they can handle is about 6 or 7 machines at a time, which means we're going to need to do an alternate setup. Now, I'm just winging it here, so I'm just going to add in a couple more cables, and then export them to a side chest they'll also export into the filing cabinet. Which, as dumb as this seems to work. Now back over at the farm, let's finally expand that one. Otherwise, we'll be waiting on our crops for quite some time. So just like with the first setup, we'll need a platform of water. And then on top of that, we'll add our rows of dirt. And then we'll just need to set up another harvester for this side of the farm. You can technically go vertical with a lot of these farms. You just have to be careful with lighting for the crops and stuff. And we got plenty of room to work with here, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. So yeah, let's go ahead and add the death to FPS sprinklers. Because again, at this point, I don't know any better. Then we'll just have to till all the land and add its fertilizer in. For some reason, you can add 2 red fertilizer into empty soil, and I tried looking it up, and it doesn't increase the speed, it seems, so not quite sure what that's about. But now that we have more farm ongoing, let's go ahead and add our crops to it. Now for this harvester, I'm just going to import the items into our system, since we're already storing those items inside the filing cabinet. Now, I should have been using way more of these, because unironically, these are the best cables in the game. Just make sure you turn them off whitelist onto blacklist, that way you can grab any kind of item. Then we'll just have to add some more seeds to the last few rows. And we'll have to come back and fertilize these when we get a little bit more red dye. Now, we're starting to get pretty close to the end game, so we gotta check up on our items that are lacking. And right now, our worst offenders are diamonds and emeralds, since they have the most inefficient crafts anyways. So let's go ahead and mega expand those sections. That way they can hopefully catch up with the rest of the crops. And again, apologies for just the god-awful frame rate. Another struggling crop is the coal sapling, which makes sense as it also has a pretty inefficient recipe. Now back over at the ore processing, we're going to need to expand this system. That way we can start keeping up with all our demand. Let's make sure that all the machines are set to auto-sort, and that they're properly exporting all their items into the filing cabinet above. Now with great machines comes great power requirements. And at this point in the run, I'm glad to say that I'm finally starting to use the actual power gen. Let me introduce you to the gas burning generator. Now, I'm not some Modpack noob, obviously, I know about this thing. I'm just so used to it being nerfed to the ground that this was not an option. But let me tell you, it works here. All we need to do here is just connect up the ethylene that I'm already producing, and we'll see that this thing is going to start generating us about 8,000 RF a tick. Now, for reference, the entire setup that I was using before this was making less than half of that. So this thing is just like 100 times easier to set up, and makes way more than the others. So yeah, let's just connect up some cables so that way we can actually get power going to our machines. Now at this point in time, we're almost 10 hours into the run, and I've been playing for at least like 13, so my brain was turning to mush, and it was time to take a break. So after some nice needed rest, I hopped onto my test world to try some stuff out, most notably that these hydrators exist, and that I should definitely be using them over the sprinklers. Heading back into the run, I also realized that I need to add some more smelteries to our setup, which of course we can actually power now that we have actual power gen. So let's make sure to max out the upgrades on all the machines, and make sure we have a folder for every type of item we're going to process. I also realized that adding multiple harvesters will increase our crop output. That way we have less crops sitting there doing nothing, just being fully grown. Just make sure the timing on each of these is alternated, which you can kind of fiddle around with by turning them on and off. I also realized that I'm going to need to head back into the Twilight Forest, since we're going to need some boron and lithium. And of course I still forget that I have vein miner. Now back in the overworld, we're going to make some boron seeds, as well as those lithium seeds. We don't technically have to make these seeds, but I'd rather be safe than sorry in case I accidentally use too much of one resource. And we're only going to need one of each of these seeds, so no need to duplicate them. Let's also go ahead and start crafting up some hydrators. At this point in the run, I decided it's not really worth replacing all the sprinklers, so we'll only craft up a few. Each of these is also going to need a couple range upgrades as well as some speed upgrades. We'll need both the tier 1 and tier 2 upgrades in each machine, so let's go ahead and craft up a couple of each of those. Then we'll just place them randomly throughout the farm. But in an ideal world, we'd only have a couple rows of these. Now let's make sure each of them gets their upgrades, and then we'll have to go ahead and connect up some cables to each one. Next up on the list, I'm going to be making a giant smeltery, which we're going to be using for processing the cookie, bacon, and donut saplings. Now you technically don't need a giant smeltery for these, but I'm planning to melt down some diamonds as well, since those are running really low. What is this? Bro, how long has this guy been here? Oh no. You were not supposed to do that. Okay, as tragic as that is, how did Burt Reynolds survive a direct creeper explosion? Like, this guy's a tank! Anyways, after fixing that up, let's go ahead and start making all the pieces for our smeltery. For the smeltery, I decided to go with a 4x4 base, but again, it doesn't really matter that much. The bigger the better, so that way I can hold more stuff, as well as smelt down diamonds at a faster rate. Let's also set up a mini lava farm for this one. That way we can just keep it constantly filled with lava. I guess I could have moved my lava farm since that thing's useless, but whatever. Now we're gonna need some of that lithium and boron from before, as well as a little bit of steel. Then we'll combine that boron and steel to make some ferroboron, which will then combine with the lithium to make some tough alloy. And with that tough alloy, we can make some machine chassis, which we'll then use to make some ingot formers. Now before we can process those, we're gonna first have to craft up their ambers, so let's go ahead and get those set up. Now back over at the smeltery, we're going to export all of our liquids into some ingot formers. These are going to be 100 times faster than casting, and fortunately don't take any power. Which also means we can put a full stack of speed upgrades into them to make them run at max speed. Now all we have to do is export all our ambers into the smeltery, which will melt them down into their liquid forms. Then we just push those liquids into the ingot formers to get their foods. Now the reason I don't process other ambers like this is because these ambers smelt nearly instantly, so we would need a very large smeltery to process all our stuff. Anyways, let's go ahead and connect up that filing cabinet to our system. We're pretty much in the end game now, and only have a couple more things to set up. One singularity is going to require 10,000 steel, so let's go ahead and set up a steel processing system, which is only going to take a little bit of charcoal to turn our iron into steel. Let's just set up a smelter next to it, so that way we can turn all that steel dust into steel ingots. And as for storing these, I'm just going to toss them into an upgraded wooden crate, since we only need one type of item in this. Next up, a couple singularities are going to require some easy alloys to craft up, so let's go ahead and set up a second system for that. This one's going to consist of 2 crushers on the side that'll break down ingots into their dusts. And for the first alloy that we're going to craft up, let's go ahead and export some gold and silver. That way we can start making some electrum. Once the crushers crush up those ingots, we'll send those dusts into our crafter, where we're going to mix them into the desired alloy. Then that dust is going to get sent into a smeltery. That way we can turn them back into ingots and start storing them inside a filing cabinet. After not too long, our steel is already done, so I'm going to go ahead and shut that one off. At this point, I also realized that I'm no longer getting any more food ambers, which means our pipes are somehow messed up, even though we have such a small system. So yeah, this genuinely baffled me for a couple of minutes, because, like, there's no way that this has random stuff in it, right? But placing down a chest seemed to have fixed it, so, you know, quite baffling. And after creating a bit of a loop here to test it out, I found out that platinum essence got in here, which was quite genuinely shocking. That how did this get in here? But after reviewing the footage, I figured it out. When connecting up my storage cable, it accidentally connected to the pipe for 1 second, which was long enough for some platinum to get in. So yeah, that was quite annoying. Now at this point, we're really reaching the end game. I decided to set up a second gas generator to start storing some power in some cubes. Now we're going to craft up a quantum compressor, which is the machine we're going to use to start making some singularities. Then we're going to have to go through a ton of microcrafting in order to make an ultimate crafting table. We'll be using the ultimate crafting table to make the ultimate singularity, so let's go ahead and mark all the singularities inside our JEI, that way we can mark each one of them off as soon as we complete them. Now we're at the point in the run where we're going to start making all our singularities. So let's go ahead and max out the upgrades on an exporter, and start exporting some iron into our quantum compressor to start making an iron singularity. Or at least that's what it's supposed to do. I clearly have my catalyst inside of this, and it's powered up, so that's quite a weird bug. But just by breaking it and placing it back down, it gets fixed. Well, clearly not visually. But we can see that after we add in our iron and ultimate catalyst back into this, that it finally stops acting up and starts making our singularity. We'll just need to wait for our 10,000 iron to get exported into this thing, which should only take a minute or two. Then checking up on that electrum, we can see we're way past the goal, so let's go ahead and start shutting that off. Then we'll set up our next alloy, which is going to require some nickel and iron. Then we'll just need to tell the crafting table to start making us some invar. And of course, we'll need to add another folder to start storing it. Now checking back up on the iron singularity, we can see that one's finished up. So let's go ahead and add that into our crafting table, and mark it off the list on JEI. Now at this point in the run, it's just time to make a ton of singularities. So let's go ahead and see how many we can craft up with everything we've stored so far. Back over at the farm, we're also going to need to craft up all our essences into their ingot forms, so let's make sure we got that set up as well. At this point in the run, it looks like the farm items are going to be the last ones to complete, which is half due to poor farm design, as well as setting up the farm a lot later than expected. But of course, we still have tons more singularities we can make, so let's go ahead and get those crafted. At this point, we've also finished up the invar and can make that singularity, and I went ahead and switched it over to making bronze. One thing that I'm still running low on is diamonds. So like I was saying before, I'm going to start exporting some diamond resin into this, since we have a ton of extra of those, and normal diamond crafts only take the acorns. At this point, we're also able to craft up our first seed singularity, which is great news because that means we can remove all our manolin seeds and replace those with whatever seed we have growing that's the slowest right now. Right now that looks like lumium seeds, so let's go ahead and start adding some more of those in. It doesn't matter too much which ones you replace them with, since if you make too much of one, you can just replace it with whatever you need more of. After grabbing up that manolin singularity, we can see we're getting pretty close to the end of the pack. Right now, it looks like we're just missing a couple seed singularities, as well as the bronze alloy and the diamond singularity. Which isn't surprising for the diamond singularity, since we're using a ton of it on fertilizer. Which is basically all we have to do right now, since we're just waiting on these crops. So I'll be using the fertilizer on whatever seed's the closest, and right now that looks like Enderium. So after not too long, we can finish that one off and start making it Singularity. Then of course, let's go back into the farm and start replacing all those seeds. Let's go ahead and grab that Enderium Singularity and mark it off our list. It also looks like we have our bronze completed, so we can start crafting up that Singularity as well. We made our Emerald Singularity quite a while ago, so I'm just going to replace all these saplings with diamond saplings since we're still pretty low on those. Now I'll just make sure to replace its filing cabinet with some new files, since we're going to be wanting to store diamond drops instead of the emerald ones. Now let's go ahead and craft up that bronze singularity, as well as a cookie one. Which means at this point, we only have 5 more singularities to go. So back to the grind of fertilizing our plants to get the last bit we need. After not too long, we have enough for our uranium singularity, so let's go ahead and get that one crafted up. And of course, replace all its seeds. We can also use the uncrafting grinder to get a couple more ingots out of these seeds, just to make sure that we're min-maxing our time. So let's go ahead and grab a couple extra lumium seeds, and then we'll place down a couple more uncrafters, so that way we can start making even more lumium. Looks like platinum is just about done, so let's go ahead and grow the last bit of those, and then craft up its singularity. And after not too long, we also have enough diamonds to make its singularity as well. So let's go ahead and grab that and add it into our ultimate crafting table, and then check it off the list on JEI. Then we quickly had enough to make our lumium singularity, which means we're finally on our last singularity of signalium. We're pretty close to having enough, and we might as well export whatever we have into the quantum compressor. Then of course, we'll just keep uncrafting as many seeds as we can to speed up the process. The visual is off. I'm scared. Please give me it. I want to be done. I want to be done. Oh, we're good, we're good. Time! Yes. So, there you have it, guys. We've successfully completed Sky Factory 4 in under 13 hours. Now, I'd like to say that this was more of a practice run, and you may see a little bit of improvement in the next video. Now, as for who did it faster between me and Martin, let's just say I have a little more experience with modpacks. Anyways, just like all my other videos, I've hidden some text throughout this one, and the first one to find it will get a free month subscription to my channel, giving you access to all my speedrunning guides and supporter chat. So, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.